Well, thanks a lot. I was asked to speak here really because of the, are we going, which one? To talk about our work as sort of second responders, and it's a little different. We've talked a lot about design. The issue I'd like to talk about was what we started in Rhode Island, which was that moment when a disaster strikes. What can you do? Architects want to get involved. You can't just sort of run willy-nilly into the abyss. And so it started a process. So I thought I'd share that with you. I talked to Illya, and we've been speaking at grassroots. And so this is a sort of a precursor of these design efforts that you've been hearing about. This is what happens in the first couple days. And what I think where it's relevant in here is how you get involved, how architects are in the public realm, and then how it informs our redesign efforts as we change codes and stuff. So, but basically in Rhode Island, we started a long time ago in, a few of us had been working on earthquake work in California where I started, where I grew up, moved here about 20 years ago. Found some other friends that were also talking about what do we do. And after Katrina, I was at the AIA grassroots, saw what the architects did down in Louisiana, and I said to myself, this could happen here. It hadn't happened for a while, but we said, we should, start. So I was just sort of a fledgling AIA government affairs committee kind of guy who I went on to become the president and of Rhode Island, and then went on to New England. And as I sort of grew, this was sort of my theme was, we should start this process. What does it take, and all that. And what I found was, it's not that easy. And you want to help, but how do you do it? And what are the liability issues? And of course, that's the key. And then, how do you prepare and this and that. So I thought I'd give you just a quick case study of our story, because it's now we've trained New Hampshire and Massachusetts in doing this, and we got a National Service Award from the AIA last year as kind of this pilot program. So we hope there's some lessons here. Some of you have been there, and let's just run through it. We all think everything, we can do what we want, design. So when we look at codes, we look at restraints, I always think of this as how does this inform our designs? And I think if we know our constraints, we know our freedoms. If we know what we need to do to survive, then we also know where we can really express ourselves. We looked at Katrina, and I pulled out some things from my work in California on the Northbridge earthquake and how it informed the building codes. And almost immediately, within a year or two of that earthquake, we had new foundation systems into the building codes and that sort of thing. When I saw the Volunteer Disaster Assistance Program of the AIA, I started mobilizing people on this. One of the more interesting aspects of this that I found, and I also found in my teaching, is that often architecture schools and architects, even though we work with planners and engineers, we don't necessarily socialize with them. We don't necessarily work with them in teams outside of our projects. And but when you get to something like this, and we had to get the attention of the state and the governor and the REMA, Rhode Island Emergency Management, we found it was much stronger if we went with a sort of combined force. We found there were like-minded engineers doing this, some of them even more organized in urban search and rescue, which assist the fire departments. They were already mobilized. They already worked with the National Guard. They work on explosions and all sorts of homeland security issues as well. So we found an eager partner, and we used it to our strength. It gave us the ability, so about 50% of this core group are structural engineers and 50% architects. And believe it or not, we got along. And we actually started to tie into a number of other organizations that were doing similar things, and we got into the training and the Code Council, and you look for champions to sort of take this and give you strength. And in our case, the building code commissioner and our building official, Jack Layden, was that guy in our case. We also had, so the two big ones were our emergency management, Rhode Island Emergency Management, and the Rhode Island Urban Search and Rescue. These were already sort of organized to deploy, knew some of the issues of being trained before you hit the site, having to have control, badging, all those sorts of things before you can just go out and start helping. Now, our task is, at the first, in the short term, was simply as second responders, not even the first responders. That's the urban search. But FEMA hasn't even arrived yet. So this typically, FEMA doesn't get there in the first 48 hours. So we're really getting there and trying to help people either get back into their homes, get their belongings out, or stay away. And so it's a plaquing system, and how many of you have done ATC 45 training in how to assess damage? Well, so that's what we did. We started training people, and we got architects, engineers, architecture students, and we started learning how to assess damage. It grew. We had a number of training sessions, and they would include the ATC 45. We've now integrated the Cal OES, Office of Emergency Services. We now do the safety assessment program of the AIA, and we do the incident command system, which is the sort of just the basics of command that all the government, all the agencies use in terms of communicating with each other. So we do 2 or 3 of these sort of training seminars a year. We bring in new members, we retrain, and then we learn from doing. The typical kind of go bag you have when you get done with the training and you're able to be deployed would be things like, if you can see there's a badge, 3 badges actually you wear. One you leave with it, with the command center, and one you wear, and one you have on your person a lot of times around your neck. But the idea is that if you come back, they can account for people that don't come back, because you actually are in harm's way in this case. In this early stage, we're out there. We're second responders, but we're still out there. You have your assessment forms, which is called a rapid assessment. It's mostly a exterior inspection of roof, of foundation. We look into the areas, basements, flooded, things, and we make a quick assessment. These assessment forms, though, then become FEMA's basis for calling out for funds and for different, this is the first sort of stuff they get from the street. We carry some field manuals, and what we found with the flooding, let me just tell you, we started thinking this was about wind and wind damage. And, we found, garage doors that would, fail and lift the roofs off, and we were thinking it was about wind. Later, what we've been dealing with is more flooding and basements filled with chemicals, brought up a whole new set of has material training. So we're now sort of embarking on, how to deal with basement situations. And it's something we frankly didn't see it coming. So this is sort of an emerging issue. And so this is sort of the new face of some of where we're going. But we moved on, and we had a deployment simulation, which was a year before Sandy, which turned out to be great because we actually worked with all the other agencies. So you had basically a camp set up. There were 800 different groups here, including FEMA, Rhode Island Emergency Management, the search and rescue. We found where we were. There were emergency medical EMT teams. There were cadaver dogs. We learned how to deal with those. We had people, how rescues are done, the ways of organizing. And then where we are over here on the left, we're operating on the building assessments. So try to either get plans. This is sort of emergency shoring. I thought it was kind of fascinating how we shore buildings temporarily, quickly. We sort of learned this along with them. We basically went building to building, posting where you go, what you do, and getting people back in their houses. You know, you're sort of filling it out on the spot. And the most everything, there's the no-go, of course, red, restricted, you don't go in, green, you can live. Almost everything is in the yellow. We're not sure, it's restricted, we haven't found out. This sets up the next step of a more detailed engineering report. But these are these first sort of days out. And so you have a chain of command, and just to quickly sort of go through this, you've got your FEMA and your Rhode Island Emergency Management. Below them are these National Guard search and rescue groups, and then we come in, and we need to be under them. We're not to be deployed. We sort of wait for our point in when to be deployed. But the big thing that's held back a lot of states from this is this memorandum of understanding that we now offer to other states as how to get through the liability part. Because what we found, and it took 4 years, that there is an insurance policy for deputizing building officials, and there's also, and so that is really the best mechanism that allows us to slide in like a rider under there if they have a huge umbrella coverage, and we're only going to be there a few days, maybe every so often, maybe once a year max sometimes. So we finally convinced them, but it took a long time to get through the red tape, and every state will have a different one. That's why I talk about this, and I was like hearing Don talk about multidisciplinary design. When you really are trying to move this stuff through legislatures and councils and attorneys for the state, you need these other agencies to step up with you. So this idea of teaming and being part of a group of professionals, I think we never would have done it if we were just architects. In fact, even our own architecture board thought we were going out to look for work. They kept saying, oh, you're trying to get work, rebuilding, you know. And we said, no, this is just to get people back into their homes, which we did after Sandy. We got 300 people, went through 300 homes in about 2.5 days, and that would have taken 2 weeks if the building officials were the only ones doing it. So it's that kind of level that we were able to add. It's an interesting period in the whole course. Now, what we're going to see the rest of the day is how we learn from here, where we go. And I think, you know, again, working with a building official over there on the top, one of us here, and the urban search and rescue, we work in 3 teams. We would go quickly through the community. Also, the community sees you there, understands the role of architects, understands people are helping. There's some psychological trauma training we learned, how to talk to people about this. And basically we try to make it, like I said, make it better. We smile, but we try to tell them, you know, we're doing something. We don't tell them it could be worse. We don't tell them things like that. We tell them we're working on it, we're here, and that sort of thing. It's a presence. But the sand overwash, Sandy was no pun intended. What we saw in Rhode Island was the beaches, the sand overwash was enormous. And we had a lot of issues with lost utilities and that sort of thing. We couldn't even find things. But this is a typical rapid assessment form. It's all made to be done very quickly, almost on the run. But this is what we've come, and this is probably not unusual to a lot of you to sort of see. But this now, as we also go through and we count up the types of damages, it informs our next steps, which I think are what you're doing, and what I'm so pleased to see today is the code, rewriting of the codes, the better practices, learning to lower expectations on building and saying, look, it isn't whenever you want it, wherever you want it. We have things to think about. But once we know those, we can still do good design. You know, we do want to build, you know, our houses to stand up. We have choices, you know. So anyway, I'm so thrilled to be here, but this was our story, and I'm glad Illya asked me to share it with you. So take care. Thanks.